Welcome back, everyone, to the Devil's Advocate podcast. I'm your host, Keane. We have a very special guest on the podcast here this evening. I am joined by former Manchester United coach, Rene Meulensteen. We're here today to talk about Rene's new book. We're also here to talk about today himself working with Sir Alex Ferguson, his key role in the development of Cristiano Ronaldo, and also other topics as well. So do smash the like in the video. Do subscribe. We really do appreciate your support. First of all, Rene, thanks very much for coming on. Really do appreciate it. I know we had a few audio issues before we kicked off, but first of all, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Keane. And I'm very well, thank you. Just come back from United States where we had a game with the Socceroos versus Mexico, which was really interesting. So, no, all good.
It's good. That's good. And look, you're keeping very active as well, which is good to see. First of all, Rene, I want to talk to you about your recent book that's come out, United, Sir Alex and Me. Talk to us a bit about that book, kind of how you came with the idea of working with Wayne Barton to kind of get the book up and running, and talk to us kind of what the book's about.
Yeah, it was. Excuse me. It's obviously the title is United, Sir Alex and Me, which basically the book is about my time at Manchester United, my time working with and for Sir Alex Ferguson. And it's all about a bit about me in terms of my journey and my life in football that I had so far. So, as you mentioned, I did it together with Wayne Barton, who actually approached me at one point when I did an event for the Norwegian Manchester United Supporters Club. And Wayne was there as well. And he actually contacted me and he said, listen, have you ever thought about writing a book? Because there's so many interesting things that you have to talk about and to share. And Wayne was not the only one. There's many people that asked me that before. So eventually Wayne and I got together, and it took us about 2 years to get it where it was and where it was ready to publish. So we did take our time, which is good. I'm obviously very happy with the end product. I want the readers to feel that when they read the book that they say, it was very interesting, it was very informative and insightful, that they learned certain things that they didn't really hear about before. So that was the main aim for the book. It coincides exactly with 10 years of me leaving Manchester United. It wasn't really planned like that. It just worked out the way that it did, but that's what it is. So happy that it's all published and out in the market now.
That's great to see. And look, and Wayne's a very good writer. He's loads of books out about United, and it's great to see that you're working together there as well. Like obviously in your book, you talk about working at Manchester United, working with Sir Alex, and obviously you're coaching at Manchester United as well. Talk to us about your philosophy of coaching, because I've read a lot of times that you're very kind of hands-on in the training ground. You worked with multiple world-class players at Manchester United. Like, what's your philosophy of coaching? How, like, in terms of attention to detail, kind of on the training ground, what would be your kind of day-to-day on the training ground when you're working at United?
Yeah, for me, it is always important, Keane, that all my sessions, they had a clear purpose. And it's important that the players understand that purpose of that session. So you inform the players what are the most important things, what you want to get out of that session. And within that session, I always make sure there was a challenge. And that challenge could be anything. That could be, a problem that we would face with the next upcoming opponent. It could be just a challenge where I wanted players individually to improve in certain aspects of the game. Anyway, so those two things were actually the key parameters. And then within the execution of the session, I always looked for quality and intensity. These two things are interlinked. So in other words, what I try to say is that everything needs to be done in, on match speed. If it's too quick, too rushed, people start making mistakes and making wrong decisions. If it's too slow, it's not match realistic. So that is where the real niche of coaching comes in, to get that right. And that has all to do with, depending on how many numbers you're working with, the distance of the pitch, the timings that you use. But those are the four main things: purpose, challenge, quality, and intensity. And if you tick those four boxes, and most likely the players will enjoy your session.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the fact that you're setting up to make sure it's in tune with obviously your preparation for the game. Obviously, the intensity has to be there, and like you said, there has to be purpose behind it. And I think, look, we've seen down the years with your team, with Sir Alex, that we always played with purpose. We always played with drive, determination. I think, look, like you said, with them things being nailed down in the training ground, like that, obviously it paid dividends.
I have to add, Keane, to that is because, the real philosophy in terms of the contents that you're going to do in the session, that primarily came from my conversation I had with Sir Alex when he brought me into his office. And that is also well documented in the book. But he basically promoted McPheeling to assistant manager, and I was promoted to first team coach. But I never forgot that meeting, because that really put all the meat on the bones for me to what I wanted to do in the session. And he brought me into his office, and he had his flip chart there, and on the flip chart he had written a few certain things. And he said, "Listen, Rene, if I close my eyes and I envision the best Man United, then this is what I see from a defensive point of view." So we talked about pressing high, or going into a block, or pressing certain players in certain areas. We talked about quick transitions. We talked about defensive set pieces. We spoke about possession, how important that was, because how to gain the initiative in the game. The importance of rhythm within possession, because good teams, they create rhythm, they maintain rhythm and change rhythm. That the players understood when we got in congested areas, they had to be able to switch to a 2 or 3 touch to a 1 touch rhythm, and within certain passing patterns and movements of players, and the identity of that players understood, the principles of think forward, look forward, play forward, breaking lines, all that to hurt opposition. And then the last bit was all about the attacking side of Manchester United. And that homed into me really, really big time, because he just written 4 words under there. And he said, "When I see United attack, I want to see them attack with pace, power, penetration, and unpredictability. And I want you to instill that in those players every single day." So on top of that purpose, challenge, quality, and intensity, those things really were the philosophy and the identity that Manchester United was under Sir Alex Ferguson. And it was my task was, to integrate that in those training sessions. And, and obviously, I think it's clear for everybody that time, particularly at that time, those things I just mentioned, pace, power, penetration, unpredictability, those were clear elements when United were at their best in that particular period. There were plenty of exciting games, you can go back and look on. So, yeah, that was very good.
And around that time, obviously, Man United at the time were kind of going through a new transitional period. We're obviously coming into a very big time of success, winning multiple league titles, winning the Champions League. How I suppose challenging was that, obviously bringing in the new younger players around that time to kind of adapt to that philosophy, your Wayne Rooney, your Cristiano Ronaldo's, players like that you're talking about, though, players of power, pace, and unpredictability. What was it like kind of molding them into that particular way of playing? And did they make your job almost easier because of their, I suppose, individual qualities as players?
Yes, they definitely did. Because these boys that you mentioned, they bring in, an enormous talent, and with talent comes an enormous potential. And then for us as coaches is to unlock that potential. We need to create an environment that those players, train with purpose, and there's always a challenge for them to get better. So the good thing as well is that the squad was very balanced at the time, Keane, because we had a lot of experienced players within Rio Ferdinand, Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, all of them. So it was a really well-balanced squad with an enormous level of experience and an enormous level of talent. So it was, like I said, the identity for them, for the players, it was easy to buy into that because it was an exciting way to play.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And look, the way we played then, and you look at, it's the Man United way, play a pace, play a power play, unpredictability. And you mentioned that the squad we had at that time, you had the experienced players with Scholes, Giggs, Rio, Gary Neville, and then you had young guns in Rooney, Ronaldo. Talk to me about the dynamic in the dressing room at that time, because obviously we won a lot of trophies, but we were coming up in a very challenging time. We were obviously challenging Jose Mourinho's Chelsea team at that time. We had a great rivalry with them over that period of time. obviously Arsene Wenger's Arsenal as well, and Rafa Benitez's Liverpool. How did you prepare for them kind of them games against them big teams? Because around that time they were known as kind of the top four, like us and them. We kind of had, so the Premier League is probably the most competitive ever was. So back in that time, what was it like, kind of thinking about these games tactically, and what kind of, like, I suppose, alterations would you have to make kind of week on week with the squad? And so how was it kind of around that time, kind of preparing for all them big games?
We had a specific way about going about it. First and foremost was that we had an enormous belief in ourselves. That was the main focus. So Alex was very big in utilising the whole squad, as you know. So rotations and making sure that we didn't overplay certain players. We wanted always our players to play to their strengths. And in terms of preparation, the analysis that you got, the reports and then the video analysis from our video guys were very, very good. But when we would address our players, it was always like the 80-20 rule or 75-25. With no disrespect to the opposition, but we always would look at their current form. Where were they? In, let's say, the last 4, 5, 6 games. We would look at the general lineups, whether there was a lot of rotations there or had a specific way, a specific system and style. What were the key players? What were the main threats? And because the other 75%, we would focus on ourselves.
Yeah.
We would always say, okay, what in this particular way, the style that, whether it was Liverpool, Chelsea, or Arsenal, how they play, or Man City, what are they going to throw at us, and how can we deal with it, and how can we make sure that we can win that game with which players and which system. I think predominantly we had whether it was a 4-4-1-1 system or a 4-4-3, we were very flexible in that, and it was all about the execution of how our wing players or the number 10 would operate. Whether they would be high and wide on the line, whether they would come into the pockets, and we would have the fullbacks coming on. That would all differ, and that flexibility, I think, that created a lot of unpredictability for us, because not many teams, they could predict exactly the lineup that we would start the game. I've heard that many, many times when I played against opposition, that all those coaches said it's so hard to prepare ourselves against Man United because we don't know exactly, how you guys are going to play. So that was a strength of ours. But the biggest thing, Keane, was we believed in ourselves. Our focus was on ourselves, mainly that, and it was all about how we can hurt the opposition. That's why our last meeting before we went into games was always called how we will win the game.
Yeah, the fact is, back when you were coaching the team, you mentioned the depth that we had in the squad. Like, some weeks we might play Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez up front, or other weeks Jason Park would come into the team, Darren Fletcher would come into the team, and you mentioned how we go from a 4-4-1-1 to maybe a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2 in some games. Like, the team was always so flexible, and like you said, there was never a time where, like, if we made a change that we wouldn't be confident about winning a game, because there was so much quality and depth in that squad. You mentioned, obviously, you're working with attention to detail on the pitch with your systems and with the way you play on the training ground. I've read a lot that you've worked closely with Cristiano Ronaldo in terms of his development on and off the pitch. How crucial was the time on the training ground with Cristiano? And just talk to me about his development in them early years at Manchester United when you were there.
Well, he came as an 18-year-old. As we know the story, because he was absolutely on fire when United played a friendly game, I think Sporting Lisbon, when they came back from a tour in America, the pre-season. And they brought him into the club, and he was just an 18-year-old who was massively talented, but also massively determined and focused. And at the time, I was doing some individual work with Diego Forlan, and EJ straight away said, "Can I join?" Yeah, no problem. It was all skill-based, skill-orientated, adding skills to what Diego was doing, and with Cristiano, it was more a matter of making him more functional. He had a lot already going for him, but it was making him understand that in terms of the 1v1s in the game that you get, it's all about, again, hurting the opposition. You need to create an end product, depending where you are on the pitch, and you're looking for a shot on goal, or a clever pass that can set somebody else up for a goal, or in the wing, when you're playing on a wing, can you beat a man and then cross the ball or play a cutback? So that was the main thread of all those sessions that we did in terms of skill development. With regards to the individual that I did with him whilst he was suspended in that particular season early on, we then focused on basically about making him more clinical within his finishing, because he scored quite a number of goals. I think 23 it was that previous season, and I also wanted him to understand what the importance of goal setting and how influential that can be. People that have clear aims and targets in their lives, they'll be far more successful than the ones that don't. And that's the same with players that go on the pitch and don't set any personal targets. It doesn't matter what you do in that game, when you come off, because if you haven't set any targets, anything is acceptable. But if you say to yourself as a forward, I want to put at least, 8 good crosses in, and you come off the pitch with only 2 crosses, then you have to ask yourself, okay, what was the reason why I didn't get the other 6 crosses in? Did the ball not come to me, or was the opposition better, or was I in positions where I could have crossed it but I didn't, etc., etc. There's much to talk about. But that was the same thing with Cristiano in terms of scoring goals, because I asked him at that particular time, I says, I assume you want to improve yourself for coming season. So you scored 23 goals. What would your next target be? And he said, I thought about it, so probably 30. I says, okay, that's okay. And he said, then, because the way I said it, he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I think you should go for 40. And he said, well, that's nearly double. I said, yeah, that's correct. He says, but we haven't really worked on specific aspects of that finishing. And so I explained him that sort of stuff. So I did a lot of stuff with him off the pitch to bring him from awareness to understanding, in terms of finishing is a little bit more than just putting the ball in the back of the net. And the better you are prepared, the more you know about it, the easier it becomes. And we highlighted, the certain aspects, the different zones in front of the game, where you are and how you receive the ball and what your possibilities are to finish in. So the main thing for me was for him that his attitude changed from, I want to score the best goal in the league and I want to score the most important goal, from I want to score as many goals as possible. That's where I want to get him to, that he understand the value of, I just need to score. And somewhere done all these goals, the most important goal and the most beautiful goal will be in there anyway. So that was the time that I spent with him in that particular period, where the first team was playing, games on a weekly basis, but Cristiano was suspended for the first 4 games. So when the team was traveling or getting prepared, he stayed behind, and that was an ideal moment for me to work with him.
And in that, obviously he's a very driven individual. I know Phil Marsh, you worked with him at the club, and Phil was telling me about a time where Cristiano was playing table tennis with him, and Phil beat him, and then Cristiano bought a table himself, came back a few weeks later, beat Phil. He said that was just the epitome of how driven Cristiano was. He doesn't like losing. On that same token, with Cristiano, was there any ever challenges with him? Like, obviously when you're helping develop and you're helping, I suppose, become more clinical as part of his game in terms of his finishing, were there any challenges around then where there was days where, he'd be frustrated with himself, or was it a case where he's just such a driven individual that every day was just like, another day on the training ground?
No, the only time that I felt that he got a bit of frustrated was that he obviously got challenged and got tackled in the game, and he was sort of throwing his arms in the air and, Rene this and that and the other, and the players and this, and then they just tried to kick me and whatsoever. And I said to him, listen, you should be happy, because that's the only way that they can stop you. The day that they stop kicking you, they found another way in stopping you, being effective to the game. So what you need to do is read those challenges, learn to read those challenges, and try to avoid them. I give him an example of Johan Cruyff, which I was a big fan of in Holland. And when he was playing in the 70s and in his best years, he would ride those challenges. He would see them coming, and he would just dive out of it or jump over it. and rather than get into it. So, but most of the time, Cristiano just loved the game. You know, it's an enormous passionate guy that loved football, and he still does. I mean, look at him now; he's 38. You know, and he's still going strong in Saudi Arabia. So, credit where credit is due. He's a phenomenal sportsman and athlete that looks after him so well, and he deserves every accolade that people can give him, because everywhere he's gone, he's been successful.
He has, and like I remember growing up watching the team in 2008 and watching that specific season. Obviously, we won the Premier League and the Champions League, and watching how he used to beat a player, how he used to be so skillful, but also score goals. And like I mentioned him and Wayne Rooney a few minutes ago, that partnership them two had, that understanding their movement. Like when I was young watching that team, I was mesmerized though how they could do that and how they do it so fluidly as well. Was that just something that was telepathic, Joe, that they knew each other's game, or was that something that yourself would have worked with them on the training ground, you know, to kind of, I suppose, build them moves, build them attacks, and just build that understanding between the two of them?
Yeah, but the best understanding is when it's built through themselves, Keane.
Yeah.
Coaches a lot of times want to manufacture too many things, what they think is right. But what you need to do is you need to create an environment where the players can express themselves and can build those connections themselves, and understanding of he's good at that and I'm good at this. You know, yes, you can help as a coach to create an environment where, you know, I think we were in that time with United, just to say, talking about, you know, the defensive side of the game, we were fairly structured and very direct with the players, what job that they had to do and what we wanted to do with them, because that is what is acquired if you want to be really successful in defending well or playing pressing well and all that. But in terms of the attacking side of the game, we give him as much freedom as we possibly could, because that creates unpredictability. If you start to be very structured in that way, what we did show them was the options, how you could open up the opposition, and then it was for them to find ways, you know, to do that. We obviously, as coaches, we created those particular games where they can express themselves, but it wasn't a case where we really told them exactly what to do. And when those connections are built, you get that subconscious understanding between those players. You know, they just have to look each other in the eye, and you know, and the other player knows exactly what the other one is doing. If you look back at the time, you know, and you look at games, you know, just spring to my mind the Bull game, the Arsenal game, and the way that we sometimes broke with players like with Wayne Rooney, Ji-sung Park, Nani, Ronaldo, was just, you know, was scary, you know, if you looked at it. And we did that, because we did a lot of wave games. I call them wave games, box to box, which players had to break lines as quick as they can with as few possible passes as possible, and break those lines quickly with speed and power, and then get to a finish, to an end of it. So that was very, you know, for us all, you know, everybody involved, was fantastic to watch.
Yeah, it was like you said, it's great to hear that. It was just like, it was something that came so natural. And yeah, you mentioned them times when, like, especially them two games against Arsenal away. I remember the one in the Champions League with that break was just perfect, the speed, the time, and everything. And then the one the season later when it was Rooney, Park, and Nani as well. Like, I remember watching that football that time, and like, I watch football now. Like, don't get me wrong, the quality of football is great now, and the sports science, everything is fantastic. But watching how we used to play back then, it was like, obviously we used to win games, win trophies, but it was actually so entertaining. Like, watching us, like, you always knew we'd go to the last minute, and we always played with freedom. And it's something that, like, I look at teams now. Yeah, some teams do play with freedom, but I feel like sometimes, you know, it's the teams don't take as much risks now maybe that they've done previously, you know. And it's just, yeah, I just love watching us back then. It was always so good. But one person I want to talk to you about is obviously an idol of mine growing up, is Sir Alex. In terms of his drive and determination and his winning mentality, like, he was someone who he never accepted second best. What was it like to work with him on a daily basis? And just talk to me about his, like, the fact that you worked with the greatest manager of all time, and looking at kind of how you and him were helping build this great Manchester United team, and kind of how much you enjoyed it.
Well, it was great. It was better than great. I mean, I loved every minute of it, Keane. And you have to understand the club of the size of Manchester United. They work amongst those following things because they have the highest ambitions. Yeah. They always want to win the Premier League, get as far as possible in the Champions League, FA Cup, Carling Cup, in that sort of order. But with those ambitions comes expectations. And to meet those expectations, you need to have high standards. And to meet those standards, you need to take responsibilities. That was how Man United operated. And that was the sort of identity, the culture that Sir Alex Ferguson created. And that was for players and staff alike. However, with those ambitions comes pressure. And if you don't manage that pressure properly, and I think that was the biggest thing that Sir Alex Ferguson did fantastically well. As a first team coach, I never felt, not one day, any kind of adversity. I've never felt any negative pressure that I thought, we need to get this right, otherwise we're in trouble or whatever. And that was purely because of Sir Alex Ferguson's man management, daily man management.
Yeah,
he knew everybody in the club, from obviously the players and the staff, but also anybody else that was there, from the people that worked in the kitchen and did the laundry. Everybody. It was a family type thing. But also at the time that I was there, we never got carried away with the highs. We never got carried away with the lows. Yeah, sometimes you ran against a big defeat or whatever, a bad defeat, but we never made it any bigger than that it was. We just stayed very, very stable. We knew where the end game was, which was lifting trophies at the end of the season. And I think that rubbed off. And because I sort of, jumped on the bandwagon with Sir Alex his final 6 years. Obviously, I didn't know that was his final 6 years, but for me, it was all about, with him, I felt that I had an obligation to make sure that in the period that I was there with the rest of the staff, that we could maintain that success, and keep being successful for the future. And, that was the main, objective that we had as staff. If you look at Sir Alex as well, as a person, as a leader, as a manager, like you said, you see, great managers, they lead, motivate, and direct. And that is exactly what Sir Alex Ferguson did. But if you break it down a bit more, he had, obviously, like you mentioned before, an unbelievable drive and determination, brought plenty of experience and expertise to the job because he knew, the Premier League inside out. He knew exactly, how to manage, the team, a squad through that period of a league, of a season. His man management, I already talked about, was outstanding. Part of that man management is making decisions, and people say that very lightly, it's all about decision making. No, it's all about making the right decision at the right time. That is a completely different thing. So there's a lot of people make decisions, but they make the wrong ones. So Alex, I think, was an expert in making the right decisions.
Yeah,
and I think the other thing, and to do that, his communication skills were excellent. He was obviously very good, but he was a very good listener as well. People forget about that sometimes. And his adaptability, you have to understand. He started at United in '86, and that landscape was completely different than when he left in 2013. And you have to have that ability to adapt to new developments, and everything that is having an influence on the club, on the daily running of the club, and he did that perfectly well. So no, it was definitely, I loved every minute of it. Keane, and it's definitely part of my coaching career for sure.
You mentioned one thing about Sir Alex is the fact that adaptability was a massive thing. Like, I look at him, what the squads he built in that 27.5 year period. The fact that he went up against Arsene Wenger's team in the 90s, Kenny Dalglish with Blackburn. Then you look at, he came up against that Newcastle team. Then he came up against the Invincibles, Jose's Chelsea, Carlo Ancelotti's Chelsea. Like, there were so many good opponents that he had, and he just, every time he found a way, and found a way. And it was just that time in Manchester United, it was such an exciting time to be a fan of the club. And yeah, it's just Alex Ferguson's story is something that, like, even if you're a young kid growing up now, or a young kid growing up 20, 30 years time, it's always going to be one of the most motivational stories you ever hear, how he came from working, on the docks, working in Scotland, and then to obviously being the manager of the biggest club in the world, staying there for nearly 30 years, and being so successful. And yeah, he's just a remarkable human being. And it's actually great to hear your insight on what was like working him on a day-to-day basis. And for me,
I have to add as well. I
yeah,
have to add as well, Keane. Otherwise, I forget it, because that was one of the most important aspects, I think, with him. He had a great sense of humor.
yeah,
There was not a day we didn't laugh with each other about something, or
yeah.
he would take the mickey out about somebody, and vice versa. It was just really pleasant, really, really great to be part of.
Yeah, and that's it. And look, the fact that he was able to like work with people on it, like, he was such a successful man, such a successful manager, and he was someone who motivated everybody. But the fact that he was able to like be so good on a human level, like you said, he knew everyone from like the tea ladies to cat in reception, to the people who make the dinner. Like it really, it really does epitomize kind of what he was. Like, he was Manchester United. Like, if you truth be told, that's what he was. He ran absolutely everything. And yeah, like, the man, like, I'll always say, like, I'd done coaching as well for a couple of years, and I always looked at his teams, look how he treats people, and just looking at how he does that, I think, though, it's obviously a model I think all people should follow. All people who are involved in football, but not just football, life in general. Like you said, the fact that whatever line of work you're in, I think it's something that, though, his approach would definitely tailor to.
No, absolutely. No, he's one of a kind, and like I said, it's not for nothing that he's been so successful, over so many years, and there's not many people given to replicate that.
No, that I think that, look, that level of success and continuity is it's going to be impossible to match. You mentioned obviously you worked in his final 6 years. I want to talk about his final season. When you worked with him, obviously we had this situation with Manchester City the season before where we lost the title literally in injury time, the Aguero moment. Talk to me about that summer coming in, preparing for the season, and the introduction of Robin van Persie. The game, almost one of my favorite players growing up at that time. He was so good, so like he was just a brilliant footballer. What was it like preparing, like losing the title in such a dramatic fashion, but then bringing in Robin van Persie? What was that dynamic like, and what was the preparation like going into that season?
Well, the preparation started in the dressing room straight after the game against Sunderland, when the manager addressed all of us, the players and the staff. And when you run into disappointments like that, and that was phenomenal, especially the older players had experienced it before, because that was the trigger for Sir Alex Ferguson to say so many years back, we want to knock Liverpool off the perch. And remember, what has happened to you today and how it makes you feel, and etc. And that was the same message to those young players there and then. And we said we walk out this door with our heads held high, and we're not going to dwell on this, but we're going to be ready already. The moment we're going to get together back in early July, and that was it. There was a clear focus and determination about everybody the moment they walked back into Carrington in July. And the fact that obviously Robin van Persie joined us was a massive boost for everybody. Obviously, we worked on it, on the transfer. The club worked on it, and we knew that was not going to be easy. It was a little bit against the sort of philosophy that Man United adopted to bringing in players in 23 years and younger. But we all felt we needed somebody that had a wow factor, and Robin had that. When he had that experience playing for Arsenal for so many years, playing in the Premier League, scoring so many goals, so many assists. So we knew that our main players, our experienced, top class players would appreciate having somebody walking through the door of the caliber of Robin. And Robin fitted in straight away. He was very, was obviously the same country as I. We're both Dutch, and I had a lot of time with him and for him, and made him settle in very quickly. Made him very clear how he operated and everything, which obviously was different from Arsenal, where where Wenger was still very much involved in the sessions, which Sir Alex Ferguson wasn't. He was there, and he was involved in other ways and capacities in terms of talking to players individually, etc. But he loved it. He enjoyed it, and we had a very good pre-season. Like I said, there was a determination and a focus, and we all knew we had to come out of the blocks really, really strong to make our intent for that season very, very clear. And we did that from the word go. And that carried us through all the way through the season in such a fashion that we build up this gap, from 10, 11, 12 points, with eventually winning the league, I think, with 11 points difference. So, and that, like I said, that all stemmed from almost from that day that we lost the league with one goal against City, where Sir Alex has dressed everybody. And we carried that renewed sort of revigorated motivation into the new season.
Yeah, I remember when that happened, the Aguero moment. I remember I had both tellies on in the sitting room. We had 2 tellies in the sitting room. I remember when that happened, and I was just absolutely heartbroken. And I knew at that point there's no way that we'd let that go. The way it happened, and the way we started that season on fire. I remember Van Persie was scoring a lot of goals, and I remember just the one thing I loved about him that season was just it was the elegance. So the way he finished the ball, like he just made it look so easy and so tidy. What was it like coaching? Like, when you were working him on training ground, was he a person that worked on his finishing a lot? I know Rude worked a lot on his finishing on the training ground after hours as well. Was Robin like that as well?
Yeah. Listen, you hear a lot of times nowadays, Keane, and all the strength and conditioning guys, be careful, you can't finish today, you can't finish. We did finishing every day with United. Every single day after training, if it was not incorporated in different finishing sessions that we did naturally anyway, and games with finishing, but there was extra finishing after every session every day. And I would always pick up a specific topic. It wasn't just firing a ball in, and then have a few shots. Yes, that happened at times, but most of the time I was always finding a specific topic where the players could practice, 10 minutes of that and 10 minutes of that. And Robin was always involved. And so was Ruud at the time, and so was Cristiano and all the other ones, because it is one of the most important aspects of the game, because that will win you games. So why shouldn't you put extra time and effort in to making sure that is optimized to its maximum? And we never had any issues with that from a strength or medical point of view at all.
Yeah, and I like watching when you watch them players and watching how they used to finish the ball. It doesn't surprise me one bit that they done so much after hours in the training ground. Like, it shows what consummate professionals they were. Obviously, we did win the league that season, and Sir Alex obviously announced his retirement at the end of the season. Since then we're kind of going through a real big transition period. I think the transition hasn't ended in the last decade. It's been, obviously, we've seen multiple managers come through the door, and currently now we have Erik ten Hag. What do you make of Erik ten Hag since he's kind of come into Manchester United, and I suppose his first season and kind of the challenges that he's had so far?
I think he can look back for himself personally to a good season, coming back into a club at the size of Manchester United, because it's a different animal, Manchester United, and so is the Premier League. It's a different animal. It always takes a little bit to get used to. In Holland, where Erik was very successful with Ajax or PSV or Feyenoord, you can turn up from the 10 games, you can turn up 6 or 7 games, and you don't break sweat, to win the game very comfortably on the basis of quality. In the Premier League, it's impossible. The top teams can lose, the ones that are at the bottom. So you have to be always at your best. But to say that Erik looks back and, got in the top 4, finished 3, getting back in the Champions League, winning a trophy, losing out on another final. So for himself, I think it's a very satisfactory first season. That in mind, that I'm sure that he's very clear on the improvements he wants to see this season. See, for Man United, it was just an okay season.
Yeah.
Because for what United expects is to challenge for the Premier League and in the Champions League. So hopefully that will be different for this year. But what I think as well is he has to start to experience over the last few months is the turbulence that Man United keeps creating over the last few months with, the Glazers and the takeover that is not taking place, the uncertainty that's created, all the stuff surrounding Jadon Sancho, all the stuff surrounding certain transfers. Now with Anthony again, that makes it so hard and so difficult because it will affect, no doubt, on a certain focus. Because what you want as a manager is you want stability. You want a team that is, like I said, very stable, and you want to have good continuity in terms of the performances and the results. And again, you look at the start of this season, there's a little bit of inconsistency, in both performances and results, and these have to improve. Well, if he wants to get back where he wants United to be in challenging for the Premier League, that has to be improved. So, I'm sure that he will find it challenging, because I don't think he's dealt with similar. Every manager at every club will have his own challenges and problems, but in Man United, they get magnified, 10 million times. I've never even brought up the Maguire situation. So all those things, they don't help, because they keep rumbling in the background, because the media and the social media keeps them alive. And unless you perform well, unless you get the results, and that is consistent, it quiets everything down. If that doesn't happen, certainly a level of unrest, a level of noise surrounding that group of players, and that doesn't help. And that's, I think, was the biggest difference under the guidance of Sir Alex Ferguson. Whatever noise there was, it had no effect on us. That was managed by the club and by Sir Alex really well, and we just carried on what we did, and we carried on winning. That was the main thing.
Yeah, look, he's had to deal with. You mentioned especially if you look at his last 2 months, he's had to deal with a lot. Like you mentioned, Harry Maguire, Jadon Sancho transfers, the takeover. Like literally, there's been so much different stories surrounding the club that's been happening the last couple of months, and it's been tough. It'd be tough for most managers, and like you said, look, I don't think any of this stuff would have been happening under Sir Alex, because he had control of everything, and like you said, like I think winning games, I think, stops a lot of this speculation and this madness that does surround the club. Rene, there's 2 final questions just before I let you go, and I've really enjoyed this interview. It's been great to hear your insight, on things on multiple different levels. First one I'm going to ask you is, when Paul Scholes retired and came back, how long was that in the works, sir? In terms of, like, obviously he came back, we had injuries and stuff like that, and he told a story that he was training with the reserves and that for a while. Was that in the works for a while, or did someone have a conversation to bring him back? Kind of, how did that come about?
I knew, obviously, because Paul was sort of, was one of the players I absolutely admire, and one of the most, and respect of what he did and the type of player that he was. And I had a lot of time for him, because obviously he became sort of more involved with us in the coaches' room.
Yeah.
And he kept them really fit with the reserves and training with those players and young players, which was good, because Paul is a very good judge about players and players' potential. So it was really good for me to know which players that I would like to bring in for the first team for training, etc. But I can remember I clocked him off. He said in the players' lounge for one of the games, and I asked him bluntly. He said, "Do you miss it?" And he said, "Yeah, I really do." And it says, playing and blah blah blah. It says, obviously we've got a few, problems of ourselves. But if Sir Alex would, open the door for you and open you, would you consider to maybe coming back? And he said, "I would definitely consider it." So for me, it was an easy conversation with Sir Alex to say, "Listen, I think you need to have a word with Paul and see what he is and where he's at. But we can obviously definitely do with his quality in the midfield, especially with the injuries that we've got." And that's what he did, So Alex just had a chat with him during that week at Carrington, and it was very, very quickly very quickly sorted, because Paul was very happy again for another half a year or half a season to put his shoes back on, his boots back on, and he was phenomenal for us.
Yeah, he's like, when you talk about vision and someone making the game look so easy, Paul Scholes was just, he was a phenomenon, wasn't he? Like his range of passing, his shooting, his intelligence. And he just made football just look so seamless. Football is like, it can be such a complicated game at times, but my God, that man, he was just a phenomenon.
Yeah, he was definitely one of the best midfielders in the world at that time.
Yeah, 100%. Last question I have here, Rennie, is one of my good friends who I talk to regularly is Phil Marsh, someone who I would have though I've talked to quite a while. You coach him at Manchester United as well. Phil told me a story before about how he used to play striker, obviously for the reserve team at the time. And he told me one game you played him at right back. How did that come about? In terms of how you shone him from striker to right back, he said, you had a detailed conversation about that one time.
Yeah, I remember it, because we were obviously struggling to fill that position at that particular time, and we had multiple options for in the striker position where Phil was one of them. But I just looked at him, obviously in training and the attributes that he had. And Phil was a good athlete. He was good in going forward. He had an engine. And I thought he could be a really progressive right back. It wasn't like, I'll put you right back to defend. Yes, you have to defend at times, but more than anything, I want you really bombing up down that line, because we're going to play with a right winger that's going to come off the line in the pocket. That opens up that space for you. And, or if we do keep with a play with a winger high on the line, then you can make the underlapping runs. And I just sort of had that conversation and says, well, do you fancy trying it? Because I can really see you doing a good job there. And he bought into it. And funnily enough, not a surprise to me, he did really, really well in that position.
Yeah, it's mad. I was talking to him. I was in Manchester there last year. We're obviously exchanging stories, and we're talking about United, and I talked about his time, and he told me about that, and it's just that just shows how much of an eye you had for coaching though, and had for players, that you can take a striker and put him into right back, and it works, like that. That's such a great story. And yeah, Phil's a great lad. Though he's very, very honest. He's great to talk to. He's a great mind for the game as well.
Yeah, I'm still in touch with him through Twitter, I think, or Instagram or whatever. But we follow each other. So yeah, I've had a few direct messages with him.
Yeah, he's a good lad. And yeah, look, he's someone who I like when I talk about football, I always ask for advice. And yeah, he's a very good lad. And yeah, and he's someone who I admire a lot. He has a great story. But Rennie, we're gonna wrap it up there. And thanks very much for coming on this evening. It's been a great conversation. And look, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk to us. And best luck with your coaching career going forward, and best luck with the book that's out as well.
No problem at all. And thanks very much for having me on, Keane, and good luck with your podcast as well.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Rennie. And for guys, make sure do like the video, subscribe as well. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Until then, guys, we'll see you later.